The honourable member for Courtenay-Alberni.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honour and privilege to support this motion today and to rise in support of it. But, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to speak on the broader issue of outsourcing and what New Democrats have been trying to do from the beginning in terms of revealing and bringing an end to the rampant source of outsourcing to highly paid external for-profit consulting firms that are making money hand over fist, Mr. Speaker. And I'll talk a little bit about that, because you heard me earlier talk about that under the Conservative government, we saw highly paid consultants double. We saw under this Liberal government, it's gone up 546% to the big corporations, Mr. Speaker, to the 6 highly paid consulting firms. And what we want to do is we want to stop these profits and this economic leakage that's happening in our country and bring that work back to public service. We saw the Conservatives with their Phoenix pay system that was supposed to save $80 million to taxpayers. It's cost us over $3.5 billion. Talk about a failure. And, I find it laughable when Conservatives are up in the polls and they want to force an election, Mr. Speaker. They want us to go from one corporate-controlled party to...
It's okay, not too controversial.
And that's not good enough, Madam Speaker. I see you've taken the chair over now. What we need to do is actually fix the problem. So we've seen wasteful billions of dollars that hurts the public service. It actually also hurts the morale in the public service. When they see a company like GC Strategies, 2 guys that don't have an office, don't have any staff, probably have 2 bar stools at a local bar that are probably dedicated to them, Madam Speaker, and they're getting $59 million in government contracts. And what we learned at Government Operations Committee, Madam Speaker, is they get a commission between 15 and 30%. 15 and 30%. Let's call it 20. That these 2 guys made $11 million just in commissions. Neither of them are IT specialists. They're headhunters, Madam Speaker. This is easily a job that should be brought in-house and not done by external consultants. But we know that ArriveCAN is just the tip of the iceberg. And we heard the parliamentary secretary from the Liberal government say, this is deeply concerning. This isn't just deeply concerning. This is absolutely outrageous, Madam Speaker. And it needs to end, Madam Speaker. It needs to end. And I want to compare the over $21 billion in outsourcing. Oh, by the way, the Liberal government wants to make us feel good. They're going to cut 15% of outsourcing. It's gone up 546%. They're going to cut it by 15%. That gives everybody at home a lot of comfort, Madam Speaker. That gives everybody at home a lot of comfort. I don't think so, Madam Speaker. That $21 billion in outsourcing, think about what that could have done in building hospitals or schools, or, Madam Speaker, a pharmacare plan that's going to cost $10 billion, or guaranteed livable income for seniors and people living in disability, the most marginalized people in our society, another $11 billion. $21 billion could have covered pharmacare and guaranteed livable income for the most marginalized. Now, the ArriveCAN cost, we saw what was an $80,000 app skyrocket out of control. And as my colleague from Timmins James Bay cited, there was money that needed to be spent in terms of the emergency response to COVID. Absolutely support that, but not this outrageous runaway train. And we put forward motions and we put forward ideas and try to actually look at the outsourcing procurement problem. We put forward a motion at Government Operations Committee to ask the Auditor General not just to look at ArriveCAN, but to look at all outsourcing and buy and sell decisions by the Government of Canada, Madam Speaker. And the Conservatives, initially were hesitant to support my motion, but they did. And then they took that motion and they brought it here to the House on an oppo day so that we call on the Auditor General in this House just to look at ArriveCAN. But we need to go bigger than that. So I supported that. I'm glad I could work with them on that. But Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, sorry, I see you're in the chair again. Let's face it, the Conservatives gutted the public service. This is when outsourcing started. We had Michael Wernick, the former Privy Council chair, show up at Government Operations Committee, and he cited it was cuts in leadership, cuts in training that started leading to the outsourcing that started happening, Madam Speaker, under the Conservative government. And those were critical, huge cuts. They were very costly, as we can see now, as the government goes to outside consultants to provide that leadership and consulting. And I'll talk a little bit about that, because we put forward actually a question on the order paper to look at, the government's spending on these outsourcing consultants. We found one, the Natural Resource Canada had spent over $600,000, Madam Speaker, to advise the government on how to cut outside consultants. So they used an outside consultant to give them advice to cut outside consultants. You can't make this stuff up, Madam Speaker. It's that outrageous. This is what we're seeing. But let's talk about the history of outside consulting and the need to invest in public servants. We saw the Conservative government privatize the pay system. The Phoenix pay system was brought in. It was supposed to save $80 million a year. It's actually cost us $3.5 billion, Madam Speaker. So when we look at the ArriveCAN scandal, this is just pales in comparison of what's happened when it comes to the Phoenix pay system. What we keep seeing is continued sole sourcing, structures of outsourcing to ensure that companies like GC Strategies are the only ones who could properly bid. We heard at committee about GC Strategies actually altering resumes so that companies would be able to help them qualify and get task authorizations, Madam Speaker. These are security clearances that are pretty critical and important to the safety of our country. We're concerned about also how they misused Indigenous set-asides. They hired a company on an Indigenous set-aside that weren't Indigenous, Madam Speaker, and the owners of that company were embarrassed when they found out, because they believe in reconciliation. They believe that money that's dedicated for Indigenous procurement should go to them. But we want to get to the bottom of this. And we talked about outsourcing doubling under the Conservative government. It's more than quadrupled under this government. We're literally seeing the corporate control parties let the foxes run the henhouse, Madam Speaker. And today, we see the Liberals and Conservatives fighting over who hired who started the whole mess with consulting, who spent more on the same consultants. It's a big problem. And what we need to do is stop the layering of commissions. We need to take actions and solve this problem. There should not be layering of commissions. We learned GC Strategies got a contract, and then they subbed it out to another contractor who subbed it out. We saw cases where Dalian and Cordex that got another one of them had a two-person outfit, was making millions of dollars, subbed out to GC Strategies, who subbed out to somebody else. They took commissions along the way. We heard from the Deputy Minister there is no limit on commissions. So you could see the commissions could turn out that they could be 60, 70% of a bid, Madam Speaker. This is an economic leakage that's out of control, and it's a self-perpetuating cycle in terms of outsourcing that reduces public service capacity. And Madam Speaker, I also, I do want to say that layering, it's like the biggest pyramid scheme I've ever seen. You get a contract, you sub it out, you take a cut, then they sub it out to the next person, and they're all friends, Madam Speaker, and these companies with, 2 staff, no offices, it's just this thing that seems to be coming up. This is just with CBSA. This needs to be looked beyond. So we wanted to look at Deloitte, for example, who went from $11 million in contracts in 2015 to $275 million. We wanted to look at PricewaterhouseCoopers, $20 million, $215 million. This is just since 2015, Madam Speaker. So I put forward a motion to expand the outsourcing study to include the big 6. And Madam Speaker, you should have seen the room when I put forward that motion. Everybody ran to their phones. The corporate control parties were checking in with their head offices, making sure it was okay to support this motion, and they delayed it. They delayed the vote on it, and then the Conservatives decided to delay it one more time. Took 3 meetings before they supported it. And Madam Speaker, the reason they supported it, because they knew that it would never see the floor. And we're on the anniversary of expanding that motion, and we haven't gotten to the bigger study. And Madam Speaker, I find it kind of odd when you got a former Liberal cabinet minister, Pierre Pettigrew, as a managing director at Deloitte. You got a former leadership contender in the Conservative Party, Peter MacKay, managing director at Deloitte. No kidding, they don't want to study it, be under the microscope, and they don't want the Auditor General coming in and taking a look, a deep dive. I mean, these big corporations, they're just like the smaller ones, like GC Strategies. They get the bid, they sub it out, they take a cut. They're not doing a lot of the work, Madam Speaker. And so we want to fix it, Madam Speaker, and we'll keep fighting for that. We want to put a cap on commissions. We want integrity in procurement. And that includes making sure that all bids are competitive instead of this sole source business. We want to end and prevent the misconduct that's taking place. And we want to stop our public dollars from turning into private profits. And, in terms of looking at Indigenous set-asides, they actually need to go to Indigenous businesses that are owned and operating, delivering services. But New Democrats are here, Madam Speaker, to actually bring solutions. Try to fix this problem so that we can get to support to Canadians that are struggling right now. Thank you.
And comments, the honourable member for Regina Louvain.
You know, Madam Speaker, we do keep records of who voted for what during budget deliberations. So I would ask this member, how does he go back to his riding when he voted 8 times to ensure GC strategy got tens of millions of dollars? He talks about the corporate parties. He literally is propping up the Liberal government to ensure ad scam continues, and GC strategy is still getting money because of his vote. It's actually quite embarrassing.
Member Courtenay-Alberni.
What's embarrassing, Madam Speaker, is I just outlined that the Conservatives are making sure that we're not putting their former
The honourable member, he had an opportunity to ask a question, and he shouldn't be talking when he's trying to get the answer. If he has other questions or comments, he needs to wait until the appropriate time. The honourable member for Courtenay-Alberni.
Madam Speaker, as I was going to say, is what's embarrassing is the Conservatives continue to protect their friends at Deloitte, including their former leadership candidate, Peter MacKay, and just like the Liberals, they both don't want to talk about it, Madam Speaker. They're both corporate-controlled parties. Now, they're trying to mislead us again. Those votes were about allocating $4.6 billion for COVID rapid tests and vaccines. There were about millions of dollars for a national child care program, funding for affordable homes and women's shelters. There's no surprise that the Conservatives voted against those things because that's what Conservatives do. They cut and gut services people rely on. We won't take any lessons from the Conservatives who gave over $7 million in contracts to the former owners of GC Strategies. They also created the Phoenix disaster, supposed to save taxpayers $80 million, cost us $3.5 billion. We've been fighting since the beginning to get to the bottom of the ArriveCAN scandal and to reduce the use of wealthy private consultants for years. We won't stop, and not just on ArriveCAN and not just CBSA. We need to look at the whole of government. We need an investigation in all of outsourcing, something that's being blocked by the Conservatives, a Conservative-led committee, Conservative chair that will not allow this motion to come back, Madam Speaker, so we can take a look at the whole picture. They don't want to look there.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, just very briefly on outsourcing issue is something in which governments, both present and past, at the national level and at the provincial level, have actually been involved. All political parties participate in it, and I suspect you would even find new Democratic administrations that have outsourced to Deloitte and Touche, just so that it's on the record. Now, the amounts might vary, obviously. But my question is that in regards to, if you take a look at everything that's been done on ArriveCAN, whether it's a number of standing committees have been investigating it, thousands of pieces of information provided. We've had departments internally. We've had independent offices of Parliament looking at it. I'm wondering if the member feels that there still is a need to continue to try to create more information on the file.
Member for Courtenay-Alberni.
Madam Speaker, we need a mechanism, a tool to do a full investigation. Right now, the Conservatives are focused on ArriveCAN because it's a gotcha campaign. It's not actually trying to fix the overall problem with outsourcing. And when my colleague talked about, an increase in outsourcing, like I said, Deloitte went from $11 million in 2015 to $275 million. I can assure my colleague there is no new Democrat government in this country that has seen such an outrageous, this isn't deeply concerning like the Liberals call it, this is outrageous, out of control spending on highly paid consultants. It's an economic leakage, work that should be done by the public service, Madam Speaker, and money that could be spent supporting people that are struggling right now.
Questions et comments.
Questions and comments. A brief question. The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. I think we're seeing a major waste, and there's cross-partisan consensus here in Ottawa. Significant decision-making is delegated to companies, sometimes like McKinsey, and here there are only 2 employees that were trusted, and there was a 40% increase in the federal public service at the same time. This is a transpartisan consensus because right now it's a Liberal scandal, but it really began when the member for Carleton was parliamentary secretary to the Department of Transport from 2011 to 2013, when his department gave $6.5 million in contracts to the GC Strategy owners, those involved in ArriveCAN. At the time, there was another name. Does my colleague find the leader of the Conservative Party silent on that?
Courtenay-Alberni.
Well, Madam Speaker, I'll say it. They're hypocrites. Let's face it. Conservatives started the outsourcing out of control situation that we're in. They cut public service, Madam Speaker. They outsource IT. They started the Phoenix debacle that was supposed to save $80 million, cost us $3.5 billion. It's absolutely outrageous, Madam Speaker. What we're trying to do, and we've been working really well with the Bloc, I will say that, is actually fix the problem, Madam Speaker. But we're being blocked by the corporate control parties at taking a full investigation and examination of this outrageous outsourcing to highly paid for-profit consultants.
A point of order, the honourable member for Regina Louvain.
I believe the member just called the Conservatives hypocrites, if I'm well aware of what he just said. I wonder if he'd like to retract that, because by his own words,
this is more of a point. This is a point of debate. Again, this is a point of debate. The honourable. Again, I'm standing. The honourable member should be sitting when I stand. It is a point of debate. The honourable member did not attack an individual member. He spoke about the party as a whole, but I do want to remind members to please be mindful. I mean, it is causing a bit of a disturbance when individuals do use adjectives that are, that cause disorders. So I would just ask members to please be more mindful. But I do want to say that the point of order that the honourable member raised is a point of debate. The honourable member for Carlton Trail Eagle Creek, resuming debate.